So it's time for some examples. Now, before we launch into that, I just want to talk about a couple of things first. So if you're not interested in looking at the whole video and all of the examples, and you just want to look at the part with your chart, that's fine. But I want to go through a couple of things first. So the charts that we're getting ready to look at, these are examples associated with the teaching videos Astrology, Introduction to Astrology 101 and 102. There are two tiers on Patreon. We have the $5 tier and the $10 tier. And the basic difference between those is that the $10 tier, you get the teaching videos with it. And sometimes I will post examples for both the $5 and $10, and sometimes I'll just do it for the $10 tier. So if you're on the $5 and you're wondering where those videos are, why you don't have access to them, that's why. Because our group is still pretty small. It's June 2023 and our group's still pretty small, so it's helpful for me to use the charts from the $5 tier, so that's fine for now. I will always give preference to the $10 tier people though when I need videos. So if I have lots of people that want to do it and I can only do 2 or 3 charts, the $10 tier will get preference. So I just wanted to make that clear. If you have any questions about that, let me know. In the teaching videos, we talked about the different elements, fire, air, earth, and water. And we went into those in a lot of detail. And then we talked about modality as well. So that's cardinal signs, fixed signs, and mutable signs. And those together they make up the 12 unique zodiac signs because there's 12 unique combinations of element and modality. And so as we go through these examples, we're going to focus more on the luminaries and the inner planets because the luminaries are the sun and the moon. The inner planets are Mercury, Venus, and Mars, and probably Jupiter too, maybe even Saturn. But the outer planets are Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and everyone in your generation or around your age is going to have, let's say, Pluto in the same sign. Like Pluto in Libra, I associate that with Gen X. And Pluto in Sagittarius, I associate that more with Gen Z. Story for another video. So we're going to focus more on the luminaries and the inner planets here. Now, let's start with Bonnie. Bonnie has her planets, they're all over the place in the chart. There's only one house that's empty. She has at least one planet in each one of the elements. So her sun is in Pisces, that's water. We have the moon in Gemini up in the 9th house, that's air. She also has Mercury in Pisces next to the sun in her 5th house. She has Venus in Aries, that's a fire sign, and she has Mars in Taurus, and that's an earth sign. So this means that Bonnie's pretty well balanced between all of the elements. So Bonnie, you're not going to, in the teaching video, I talk about issues, having maybe too much of one of the elements or not enough of one of the elements, and you're not likely to have any of those issues. The modalities are cardinal, fixed, and mutable. And Bonnie's sun in Pisces and the moon in Gemini are mutable. Venus in Aries is cardinal, Mars and Taurus is fixed, and so you're pretty balanced there too. But as far as your inner world, the sun and the moon are really important as far as our makeup. And so since those are both mutable signs, there is the chance of having mutable sign issues. Because the moon is our inner world and the sun is our energy, and so with the mutable signs, it's about being flexible, and especially Gemini and Pisces. Sagittarius and Virgo are also mutable signs, but specifically Gemini and Pisces tend to be more go with the flow, and they tend to be a bit more adaptable. And so you'll want to be careful that you're not being too adaptable or too flexible and bending around other people, as we've talked about in other videos, and we'll discuss this more when I do the teaching video on the houses. But you have all of your inner planets and the luminaries are on the right side of the chart, and so that side is, that's our relationship with other people. And so we have the energy of adaptability combined with focus on others. And so it's important to stand your ground sometimes and not adapt too much. I see over there Uranus is in the first house, and the first house is how we interact in relationships, and Uranus is very independent. And so if you adapt too much, you will feel this inner restlessness. There will be signs of, whether it's like anxiety or irritability, or just generally a feeling of unease when things are out of balance. So there will definitely be signals there. Now, next we're going to go to Lisa. You're going to see my eyes go up because the chart I have for Lisa is actually above my camera, so that's why it looks like I'm looking up. I don't feel like rearranging things right now, so you'll have to deal with that. Lisa has lots going on in Pisces, which is mutable and water. And so any of the issues that we talked about with having lots of water in the chart or lots of mutable, that would apply to Lisa. And especially because the north node is in there, and so the north and south nodes are mutable. So this is something that has been issues in past lives because the nodes are associated with past lives. And so in any mutable issues, just like we talked with Bonnie about flexibility, and here we see lots of planets in houses 6, 7, 8. We just talked about that with Bonnie, right? That's about the other. And so giving oneself away too much, or being too flexible, or bending around other people and what other people want, gotta watch out for that. Guess what else Lisa has that Bonnie has? Uranus in the first house. Pluto's there too. There's lots of differences as well. Lisa has Moon in Aries, which is fire. Mars in Taurus, which is earth. What are we missing? So we have lack of air. So that's different. Now Uranus is in Libra. And all these are color-coded in my chart. So you might be looking things up on astro.com. So that's not as customizable as my solar fire here. But I have everything color-coded, so it's a little bit easier to spot with the eye. And I have the air signs color-coded as green, so Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. And here Uranus is in Libra, but that's a generational planet. It still has some effect. It's still air, right? But it's just not as strong as the other signs because it's not an inner planet. And so I would consider either, this is lack of air or low air, because there's just one planet. The rising sign is Virgo, which is earth too. So air is communication, thinking, learning, information, logic. So we could see more emphasis here on emotions versus logic. Now, Lisa can be logical. I don't want to say that she's not. She has Virgo rising, and Virgo is an earth sign. It's the material plane, but Virgo is also ruled by Mercury, and Mercury is logic and analysis. And so, Lisa, you can be logical and rational. That's true. But I do see more emphasis on emotion, feeling, and impulse, which is that belongs to water signs and fire signs. And you have 5 placements in Pisces over there in the 6th and 7th houses. And you have Chiron, Eris, and the moon in Aries, which is fire. That's a lot of fire and water. That's a lot of emphasis on feeling and impulse. And so it just means that there needs to be more conscious energy applied toward actually communicating what you feel. And I mean, emotions aren't always logical, but you may have to put in more effort to trying to understand where those feelings are coming from and why you're having certain impulses. Communication may not always be easy, or having the connection in your brain between the right side and the left side. It just takes more practice as we get older. And when I say possible issues, or issues with like logic or being rational, I don't want to imply that there's an extreme problem there. And we can be born with certain challenges, but we can put the effort into working through them. I was born with a communication disorder. It was a mild one, but now I communicate for a living. It just meant that I had to put in more effort into communicating and working on my vocabulary and finding the right words and things like that. But having Virgo rising for you and the South Node in Virgo are extremely helpful, and you probably use that to kind of compensate for the lack of inner planets in air. But you still have air sign operating in your chart, because Libra, an air sign, rules over your 2nd house. Aquarius, air sign, rules over the 6th house. And Gemini, air sign, rules over your midheaven. And so they still operate very much in the areas of work. And so that's probably where you communicate the most, or you're the most logical, is in that area. And so it's taking what you learned there and trying to apply it to other areas of life, for example, the personal life. And if you all ever have a question on what I mean by certain things, because I'm really, right now I'm taking like chunks of the chart and we're like parsing it out one thing at a time. It's not always easy for me to do, but if you're ever concerned about what I mean by something, please by all means ask, and I will clarify. Next, let's do Shannon's chart. Shannon has quite a bit of fire and air and earth. And so here's the fun thing about evolutionary astrology and past lives. If someone doesn't do evolutionary astrology, they would miss this. So let's say that I didn't read past lives, and evolutionary astrology is the study of past lives, past life karma, and soul growth. And so if I didn't do that, I would look at Shannon's chart and say, wow, you have all this going on in fire and air, and you're probably a pretty fiery, energetic person, and there's very little water in the chart except for Saturn in Cancer right at the end of the 8th house. So we could say that Shannon's not overly emotional. We would say Shannon's mostly logical and rational and open-minded, and we maybe think that she would have more issues associated with lack of water in the chart. And water is imagination and sensitivity and the inner world. But I am an evolutionary astrologer, so I would say Shannon has South Node in Cancer, and so someone else might think Shannon lacks imagination, but I don't think that at all. I think Shannon, you have probably a lot of gifts associated with being imaginative and gifts of processing emotion and being able to nurture another person, and probably spent the past life in a parent role nurturing children. And you have a lot of gifts there. So you've come into this life to be more goal oriented and focus more on outer world accomplishments, and you've set up your personality in this life to focus on that. You're not here to focus on the emotional stuff, whereas maybe another astrologer would say, oh, you lack water, and so you need to work on processing, being able to process your emotions and be sensitive to other people. But I would say, no, you've actually worked on that and you're really good at it. You don't need to work on it now. That is a gift for you. And there's other things that you need to do in this life. And so understanding the nodes in the chart is really important. I will be doing a video on evolutionary astrology and kind of introduce you to those concepts. But there's here we have Sun in Virgo in the 11th, but we have Moon and Jupiter together in early Aquarius, which is air sign, and Venus and Uranus together in Libra in the 12th house, which is air sign. And so these are communication gifts, and I would say you probably can communicate feelings pretty well. But with Sun and Mercury and Virgo, you think pretty rationally and logically and are well grounded. And there's a nice, I mean, so far these charts have been pretty well balanced. Virgo, Sun in Virgo, that's a mutable sign. Venus in Libra, cardinal sign. Moon in Aquarius, fixed sign. So you have a nice balance between the modalities there. Now I'd like to go to Cara's chart, because so far we've just had a nice balance with, I say nice balance, but I mean, nothing in the chart is necessarily inherently good or bad. Some people have a balance between all of the elements in their chart, fire, air, earth, and water, and some people don't, but it's all for purpose. And so it doesn't mean that any chart is necessarily better or worse there. But Cara has a stellium in Virgo, meaning she has Sun, Uranus, Pluto, and Venus all in the 12th house in Virgo, which is mutable. She was born just after a full moon. The moon is in Pisces. And Mercury and Mars are both in Libra, which is cardinal. And so what are we missing? And the Virgo, Pisces, Libra, that is earth, water, and air. So we are not seeing fixed signs of the inner planets. Now we have Saturn in Aquarius in the 5th house, and Neptune in Scorpio in the 2nd house. Those are both fixed signs, but they're outer planets. And they are in a square. And we have, oh, and the fire signs. So there is Jupiter in Aries, but there's no inner, and really the inner planets are Sun, Moon, Rising, Mercury, Venus, Mars. Jupiter and Saturn are kind of like the in-between planets. We call them the social planets. And we'll be talking about that as we get into the videos about the planets, which it will be Introduction to Astrology 103, 104, and 105. But with Jupiter in Aries, yes, that's a fire sign, so we do have some fire here, but that's just one planet in fire. So I would say here we have a lack of not as much fire and not as much of the fixed signs. And the fixed signs, which are here, they're in Aquarius and Scorpio, the two outer planets. Leo and Taurus are other fixed signs, but we need fixed signs to be able to stick with things, to be able to develop habits and stay with those habits. And so Cara is very changeable and adaptable, which can be great because she's not too rigid, but there may be difficulty with sticking with something and keeping it the same. So let's say you're trying to develop a new habit, like a new part of daily routine, and trying to become more efficient. That could be a little bit more difficult. Maybe Cara would feel comfortable with commenting on this and in her experience. And if you're not, that's fine too. It's up to you. But that's what the fixed signs do for us. They help us stick with things and help us create some stability and something that we can rely on. Not just with habits. I mean, that's with relationships or job, things like that. And we really do need to consider the whole chart. I mean, that Saturn is in Aquarius. It's making a trine aspect to Mars in Libra. Those are both air signs. And they also trine the midheaven in Gemini. And I would say that it may be easiest for Cara to, if she's trying to stick with something, it in the workplace might be the easiest place, because Mars is in the second house, and that's second house is connected to work. And the midheaven at 22 degrees of Gemini is also connected to work and in career path. And so, and when you have a Saturn-Mars connection like this, and they're in a trine, which is around 120 degree angle to each other, that helps to provide the focus that one needs in order to reach goals. And so, it's there. Even though there's not inner planets in fixed signs, I mean, it's there. We're just seeing it in a different place and being applied in a different way. And so I would say it would come out maybe the most at work. And Cara, if you care to comment on that, we'd love to hear from you. I would love to hear from you. I would love some feedback on that. No pressure, though. Don't want to pressure anybody. So we talked about Cara having a lack of fixed signs. Here we have Christina's chart, and Christina has quite a few fixed signs. She has Sun and the Moon and Mercury and Chiron and Ceres all in Taurus, and that's a fixed sign, and they are opposing Uranus in a fixed sign. And they are squaring the nodal axis. So really we call it a grand cross. When you have an opposition and another opposition and everything's squaring each other, we call it a grand cross. And it can be frustrating, but when it's in fixed signs, it can make it a little bit more frustrating. And here involving the sun and the moon, we're talking about getting one's needs met, and in opposition with Taurus and Scorpio specifically, one can feel like they are always between a rock and a hard place, or this axis, sometimes we call it the immovable object and the irresistible force. You know, there's something that you really want, and here the thing Christina probably really wants is independence. But then we have, so maybe, you know, when wanting independence, or this Uranus looks like it's in the fourth house. So it just may feel like there's some difficulty with feeling like we really need something, but at the same time, there's a certain life structure in place that can make things challenging. And Christina, if your birth time is 11:25 a.m., this is probably going on between trying to balance your work life and home life. And in the teaching video, it's in the video Introduction to Astrology 102, and we talked about the fixed signs, and here Taurus and Scorpio are fixed signs. It can be challenging because we can get into habits that are difficult to get out of, and the longer we're in the habit, the harder it is to climb out, or we can feel like there are certain structures in place that we have a difficult time changing those structures, and so it can just require more effort. So on the one hand, with fixed signs, they help us continue habits and things about our life that we appreciate. At the same time, if there's something we don't like, so if it's a bad habit or a life circumstance that we're finding challenging, it can take a lot of effort to create change. But Christina has Jupiter, Mars, Saturn in Virgo in the second house, and Virgo is a mutable sign, and mutable is about change and adaptation. And so it's the second house of values and skills and developing our skills. And so, and Virgo is the sign of service. And so Christina may, you know, these are skills that she's probably developed throughout her life in order to deal with things. And so a skill that she has in order to deal with this opposition, I would say, would be hard work, persistence, being of service, and digging into the details and analyzing what's going on in order to shift directions, if that makes sense. Jason's chart here is pretty interesting, so I want to point a couple of things out. So far, we really haven't looked at any chart or had any example of someone who was very heavy cardinal signs or had lots and lots of fire. Seems like most of these examples have been pretty balanced with the modalities and with all of the elements, and Jason's chart is no different. Here we have Sun in Leo, which is fire, Moon in Cancer, which is water, Mercury's in an earth sign, Mars is in an air sign, and we have cardinal, we have mutable, and we have fixed. But here's the interesting thing about Jason's chart, and it's something I haven't talked about yet, but the sun and the moon here are actually quite strong in their sign. The sun is in the sign of Leo, and the sun naturally vibes to fire signs like Leo, but the sun is the natural ruler of Leo. Leo is its favorite sign. And the moon naturally vibes to water signs, emotion. And here the moon is in Cancer, and the moon rules over the sign Cancer. It means that is the moon's favorite sign. So here the sun and the moon are very strong. And we have Mercury in Virgo. Guess what sign Mercury rules over? Actually, Mercury rules over Gemini and Virgo, because Virgo is very rational and analytical, and Mercury rules over the mind. Now, Venus is in Leo. Venus doesn't rule over Leo, and Mars doesn't rule over Aquarius, but I thought it was pretty interesting that the sun, the moon, and Mercury are in the sign that they rule. So, I mean, strength is good. The sun being strong in Leo, and Jason probably feels comfortable expressing himself and being himself, and the moon being strong in Cancer, comfortable with emotions. But with a planet strong in sign, sometimes things can be taken too far, and probably not on a regular basis, though. I would think when there's a particular transit. So if Jupiter is going through Leo, which it's not right now, June 2023, Jupiter is newly in Taurus. But when Jupiter goes through Leo, we could see those Leo qualities come out in full force. Or if Jupiter or another planet goes through Cancer, we could see that Cancer moon become dominant. And one more thing I want to point out, so I mean, we have a nice balance here between the elements and the modes, but there, if you look at Mercury in Virgo at the end of the 10th house, next to the sign Virgo, you'll see it's at 9 degrees, and that little 24 with the tick mark means 24 minutes. So 9 degrees, so about 9.5 degrees. And then you'll see an R there with like a little cross through it. That means retrograde. So it means that Mercury was retrograde when Jason was born. And lastly, here's my chart. Speaking about fixed sign trouble, I have a lot of planets in fixed signs. I don't have a cross like Christina had in her chart, but I do have what we call a T-square, and that's when we have planets that are opposing each other, and then you have at least one planet making a 90-degree square to those. And here I have the moon, Chiron, and Vesta in my 4th house in Taurus, fixed sign, opposing Mercury and Uranus up in the 10th house. And then they're being squared by Mars and Leo, another fixed sign, over in the 8th. And I do have planets on that Scorpio Taurus axis like Christina, and so in the 4th and 10th house, trying to balance work and family. I had kids very young. I was 22 when my first was born. Now they're all the kids. I have 2 stepchildren now, so now all the kids are in their late teens and early 20s, and they really love us, and they want to be home a lot, even even now. When I was that age, I couldn't wait to move out. Our kids are not like that. I think some of it's their generation too, and so trying to find my life path and balance that with family obligations has always been challenging for me. And I spent about 10 years raising my kids by myself, and so that's another part of it. But Mars is squaring that, and when you have a T-square like this, and we'll talk about this when we talk more about aspects and aspect patterns, but the planet that's making the square to the opposition, and here for me that planet is Mars. That planet is the answer. to finding the balance. The opposition, you're trying to find balance between two opposing forces. But if you have a planet squaring that axis, it's actually helpful, and you need to use that planet's energy. So bringing out my inner warrior. And it's in the sign of Leo, which is being dramatic, putting on a show. And my issue would be, I have mutable signs. I have Saturn, North Node, and Jupiter in Virgo, but none of my inner planets. And so, trying to be flexible sometimes is a bit of a challenge for me. But the more I do it, the better I get at it. And Saturn is my chart ruler because I have Capricorn rising, and so that's a little helpful there.